Hello and welcome. I'm Aaron Cooper. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Policy at the Business Software Alliance. And one of the things that means that I get to do is work on policy issues that affect the enterprise software industry all around the world, which is a wonderful thing, and I really enjoy doing it. But perhaps the best part of my job and what I get to do is to talk to people like Chandler Morse, who's here today from Workday, to talk about AI policies with people who have had a lot of experience on both the private sector as well as in the government, and can really talk about why AI policy is so important from both perspectives. Now, in full disclosure, I've known Chandler for probably 7 years. We've been working together on technology policy. And actually, when AI policy first was really starting to pick up a little bit, I remember one of the things that we were talking about is what can we do as an industry, both as an association and as leading companies in the industry, to demonstrate how important it is to develop and deploy AI in a responsible manner. And that led, after a bunch of conversations, to BSA put together a framework for combating bias in the use of AI and the way it's developed and the way it's deployed, and making sure that responsibilities are allocated in those ways depending on what information the company has. Because at the end of the day, responsible AI makes all the businesses much more successful, puts trust into the system, and that's key to the enterprise software industry. Chandler, you've been chief of staff in the Senate and you worked in the House for a number of years. You've seen administrations change over. What do you hope to see from the incoming administration on AI policy? And does that line up with what you anticipate?
That's an interesting question. And I'm almost positive you and I crossed paths in your previous Senate world and life and mine. So we probably have known each other maybe a little bit longer than 7 years. Look, they've told me in this business you have to be able to separate your predictions from your preferences. So I'm gonna try to do that. As we have with previous administrations, Workday looks forward to working with the new incoming Trump administration on issues that can, both affect our company as well as our customers. I think from the get-go, it is pretty widely anticipated that the incoming administration will likely withdraw either in whole or in part portions of the Biden-era executive order on AI. I think they're probably looking at doing that, and I'm not sure whether this is a prediction or a preference, as a way of building on the foundation that the first Trump administration laid when it came to AI governance. So as that issue has only grown in interest and in priority, I'm certain I'm hoping they'll pick up where they left off, in that the first Trump administration did issue an executive order on the federal use of AI, laying out some thoughts on how federal agencies should leverage the technology. Also kicked off an AI competitiveness executive order that launched their AI initiatives office and some programming there. So our thoughts are that it will be a priority. We're also, I think, like most in DC and around the world, looking at the personnel they're looking to put into place, and folks like Kratsios, who was formerly the chief technology officer under the last administration, coming in at OSTP. So we do anticipate AI continuing to be a priority in the federal landscape, and some initial actions probably by the Trump administration. Although exactly what those will entail, we're waiting to see.
One of the other things that the Trump administration did the first time around and was to sign the law that required NIST to put together a risk management framework. And that kind of risk management framework is something that we've seen as a way for there to be flexibility in how AI systems are developed and deployed, but making sure that they're done responsibly. Given that some of the folks who were in the first Trump administration are coming back, like you said, Michael Kratsios and Lynn Parker, do you think that model of having risk management frameworks as the basis for a U.S. policy position is likely to be something that we'll see in the next administration?
Again, separating my predictions from my preferences, I certainly hope so. Workday was proud to be an early champion of the NIST AI risk management framework effort, and also filed. Our case study was the first implementation of a company seeking to leverage that NIST published. So that the NIST AI risk management framework is near and dear to our heart. It is what has helped scope out and form the foundation for Workday's own responsible AI program. It has been in the model of the NIST privacy framework, and I think the NIST cybersecurity framework, in that it is quickly becoming a little bit of a foundational piece for everyone as they start to think about how to manage AI risk. It has been our hope that that both the Biden administration and then hopefully the incoming Trump administration will continue to both fund NIST at a level that is commensurate with their growing responsibilities when it comes to AI governance, and then do everything we can to push the adoption of the NIST AI risk management framework in both the U.S. and frankly abroad. There certainly the EU AI Act is moving forward, and it is a model to address issues around AI governance, and governments around the world outside of Europe are looking at how they can handle these, and many of them are looking to the NIST AI risk management framework as a piece of that foundation to put in place as they think about how they're gonna meet these challenges and manage some of these risks. So we hope it doesn't go anywhere. We hope it continues to be developed. There is more work that can be done, not unlike in the cybersecurity framework end of things on sector profiles and different specific ways to implement the NIST AI risk management framework that we think can encourage its adoption, that we think is great work that can be done.
That increased role that NIST has had on AI has been interesting. I remember when it was really hard to get NIST to talk about AI, and then it became part of the first Trump administration's executive order on AI, gave them a really prominent role on the issue. And now that there is so much work being done on it, the funding issue is really important in creating both being part of standards organizations and helping create standards where the U.S. is leading. I think is really important and helps with developing global consistency around something that all of industry can participate in.
100%.
Aspect.
100%. I think we are heading into a phase of AI governance policy where alignment on standards is going to be crucial. So the EU AI Act is moving forward. They have work streams associated with standards. The NIST AI risk management framework is in place. You've got countries like Canada, Japan, Australia, Korea just passed something. Many countries looking to, and I'm sure we'll talk about the states in a second, but the states are moving forward as well. And the more we can have these aligned or harmonized underlying standards to underpin those AI governance, the more likely those frameworks will be successful. And I want to be crystal clear, and we've enjoyed our partnership with BSA. Early work on the BSA AI framework was crucial to lay some of the foundation as well. I keep using that word foundation, but it is sort of the phase we're in terms of, you know, the Jello is starting to harden into actual approaches, but that work that can underpin those foundational standards will pay dividends in the long run. And those dividends that we see are dividends in trust. So at the end of the day, Workday is all in on AI as a means of unlocking human potential. And at the same time, having been involved in the development of HR AI related tools for over a decade, we also recognize that there's the potential for unintended consequences. And we're not the only ones that recognize that. Policymakers around the world are recognizing that. We are very proud of our responsible AI program that we've put into place. We we have our own set of values that drive how we develop, how we deploy, how we think about AI and these issues, both so that workers and employers and our customers can see the value of the emerging technologies. But there is a level of trust that really can be gained not only by corporate voluntary actions, but also by a regulatory framework inside government that sort of lays out kind of what everyone can expect, kind of what the rules of the road are. So we are very focused on not only making sure that the regulations that we see around AI governance support ongoing innovation. We are, I think everyone agrees, we're also sort of in early days of where we see AI technology going, the benefits, how it's implemented, the use cases. But we're also very focused on ensuring that those AI governance frameworks are workable and actually lead to building trust, so that folks feel good about using these technologies, participating in these use cases to see the benefits, and they frankly just won't if they're scared of the technology.
I really like the way you phrase that, because sometimes we will hear how should we strike a balance between trust and innovation, and I really think it is not a question of one balancing out the other. You advance both by having a framework in place that raises everybody's game so that the best practices are adopted across the industry, and then companies go above and beyond that to demonstrate to their customers, this is why you want my service rather than somebody else's service. It just works better, right? And that's ultimately what's going to be important for adoption. So you referenced states. So since both of us did work on the Hill for a long time, we know the difficulty of there being legislation passed through Congress on AI, though there have been some I think real good faith efforts to try to move that along. But we've seen Colorado enact comprehensive legislation that's focused on primarily high risk AI, and with the process in Connecticut, and with I think 49 states participating in that working group, we see a lot of momentum at the state level. What do you think we'll see over the next year?
I think I don't want to let past at least a comment or two about Congress. We do have Senator Cruz coming in as the incoming chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. He has a distinct interest in AI and AI policy, AI competitiveness. So we know that will be a focus. We'll also see a new incoming chair, Guthrie, on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, also a member that has been engaged in AI issues, particular interest in AI and healthcare. So we will see Congress, I think, take steps, follow up on the Senate roadmap, follow up on the bipartisan AI task force work that went on. But as you say, the margins are thin in both the House and the Senate. So calibrating, again, that predictions from the preference about whether we'll see legislative action. This year, we'll expand that deep dive into also Colorado. You mentioned they passed their law, current governor, the legislative leadership, and the attorney general, that maybe there are some tweaks to the law that need to be made. So I think we anticipate Colorado reopening that process. They have an AI task force that's looking at what that could look like. I've heard, I think BSA, we've worked with state lawmakers in Connecticut and others. There's been, projections in as many as 12 bills might be passed. I'm not sure how many laws we'll see signed into law, but I certainly think we'll see continue to see an unbelievable amount of focus at the state level on AI governance issues specifically.
Well, one of the things that some of the states that you mentioned highlights, and it also relates to federal legislation, is the bipartisan nature of the issue. And one of the great things about the issues that we work on in the enterprise software space is that the issues tend not to be bipartisan. It doesn't mean that there's no politics involved, and it doesn't mean that there's consensus everywhere, but it doesn't break down on party lines the way some other issues do. And so you could have Texas working on a bill that looks similar to a Connecticut bill or a Colorado bill, and I think it also harkens back to what you were saying earlier about the importance of international consistency. Having consistency in the way AI laws are created and applied, both within the United States and then also taking that as a leadership globally, is, I imagine, super important to companies that are operating globally, to make sure that you can continue to create jobs here, that you're not spending all of your time on the nuances of different compliance programs that could be inconsistent with each other.
I think that's, again, we use the word workability quite a bit. To me, a heavily fragmented regulatory landscape leads to regulatory landscapes that collapse under their own weight. And so it's on the one hand, you can say, oh, well, companies just want to have easier compliance. And I'm not going to, the burden of compliance is real, and ensuring that there are benefits to that compliance. It makes sense to ensure that the work that people are putting in see benefits at the end. In this case, that benefit is measured in the form of trust. But on the other hand, that workability isn't just about the easy or toughness for employers or companies. It's also about whether or not the framework actually can work. I mean, whether it actually can sustain historical tension. It's like innovation or regulation. And in our case, when it comes to AI, it's probably innovation through regulation, in that if there's not a market, in that people don't feel comfortable using the technology, there's just not a market. And so that regulation can lead to and lay the foundation for folks feeling comfortable. If states take up the charge, then we're gonna see an Armageddon of a patchwork of state bills. And I think our experience privacy is, yes, that is always a threat. It is a worry, but there's also starting to be a tremendous amount of alignment between states that can actually happen. States are talking to each other. And in the AI issue, we're seeing very similar things than we saw in privacy, with a couple of tweaks. So one is the rapid, like how fast this is happening. When Europe passed the GDPR, it took a couple of years before we started to see legislative action. I mean, the EU AI Act isn't even fully in requiring compliance yet, and we've already got Colorado passing bills. So it's happening quicker. And then, as you mentioned, the multi-state approach that's going on, the collaboration between state legislatures to try to think about what a high watermark looks like on AI that isn't different depending on what your zip code is, that's happening organically. Don't think we've seen on other issues at this juncture. So there is kind of, in some ways, we've seen this movie before, but in other ways, the global tech policy landscape is evolving in how we are developing AI policies.
I think it is. I definitely think it is encouraging that we're seeing, both in the state level and internationally, we are seeing some efforts at trying to develop interoperability or consistency between different systems. One other thing that I think of as slightly different on the AI side than from the privacy side is that so many of the AI issues are still being developed. So, for instance, when the EU first started working on the AI Act, ChatGPT hadn't been released yet. There was nothing on general purpose AI. And then general purpose AI issues started to creep in. Well, more than creep in, moved in really fast there. And now we're seeing that in the US as lead to a question of what's the next thing that we're going to see as an issue that needs to be addressed as part of AI legislation. And I think we've always focused mostly on what's an identifiable risk, like bias or discrimination in housing or employment or getting credit, and saying what are the steps that a company should take to mitigate that risk. But there are an increasing number, depending on what industry you talk to, of different things that different industries are concerned about, and that can lead to, I think, during the legislative process, new issues coming in.
You've been at BSA a number of years. I'm not sure I've seen an instance where so much attention has been on a specific technology and how to leverage it, how to build use cases. So our, counsel to policymakers around the world is this issue is moving really quickly, and every month or legislative session that goes by without a response is a quantum leap in where these issues are going. And so there really is a time value of acting now. The interesting thing, which we also have pointed out, is we have adopted AI governance and smart safeguards and workable solutions around guardrails for technology before. We just mentioned privacy. And so there are ways of, there are some fundamental things, and algorithm that decides whether I like Peaky Blinders or Downton Abbey. If they get that wrong, it doesn't really matter. Is there a lot of risk there? Probably not. shouldn't get the same level of scrutiny as something as an AI that's looking at my chest X-ray for anomalies. Like that's a different profile and needs to be differentiated. We also need to deploy workable accountability tools. We have used impact assessments in the privacy regulatory regime for a while. They're known among the technology industry. They can be applied to the AI use cases. We also need to clearly delineate roles and responsibilities. There are those that are developing the AI, there are those that are deploying the AI, there are those that are using the AI. And then we've touched on harmonization. You can cover like the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of details, but with a few basic chunks, you can cover a significant portion of what you need to get done to start on an AI governance approach that can, again, lead to that building trust, supporting innovation, and on. It might not be perfect. It might need to be revisited. There might be new use cases or issues, but we're sort of encouraging everyone to get a start.
Yeah, that identifying known risks and trying to figure out what kind of flexible approach can we put in place to make sure that we're mitigating those risks, requiring companies to do what is within their bailiwick to do, whether, as you said, you're developing or you're deploying the system, is hugely important because it goes to the question of workability. And is it going to be effective both for promoting innovation and at the same time for making sure that consumers, that your customers, know what their rights and responsibilities are and what they should be doing. And I think whether you're the one who's developing the AI system or you're the one that is deploying it, having a consistent framework can be super important there.
Totally agree.
I assume one of the other big places that you're working, you've talked about it a few times, is in the EU, because while the EU AI Act is passed, we still have a lot of implementing rules to come out. It's an area where I think we've talked before about how it's important for the US to be actively involved in some of those conversations, and the better built out position the US has, the more influential it can be. I mean, I think that's been true on a number of different issues. What's your outlook for the EU, and are you optimistic, pessimistic about how that'll go?
I think our outlook on the EU is based on our experience. We started to participate in the around 2018, 2019 at the very beginning of the EU AI Act process. I think everyone had taken a lesson from GDPR. So I think when Europe said we're going to regulate privacy, everyone sort of chuckled and said, good luck with that. And then they passed GDPR. And so when they said we're going to regulate AI, I don't think many of us chuckled. We thought, okay, we should engage. If I'm honest, I thought we would have to push the door open to offer perspectives. And really what we found in Europe was a recognition that the technology was moving really quickly and that their lawmakers didn't know everything. And so we kind of pushed on an open door. In those processes, we work closely with BSA's European team, who are near and dear to our hearts, because there's a lot of waterfront. It was a big bill. There were a lot of moving parts, and so a lot of that cross-industry collaboration was critical. Our initial push was, let's make sure the definition of AI was somewhat aligned with like the OECD, and so we weren't sort of looking at even foundational parts that varied. We knew HR AI is often considered high risk, but we wanted to really ensure that the risk-based approach was nuanced enough to look at use cases inside sectors, not just designate entire sectors. We were very focused on the workability of requirements, not afraid of requirements, but wanting to make sure that those requirements that were going to be put on those who are developing AI could be achieved, could be executed on. And if I'm honest, at the end of the day, we were pretty pleased with how the EU AI Act landed. I think I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but you and I both know that often in the policy line of work, your bar is sometimes like, well, it could have been worse. How was it? Well, it could have been worse. Like we think we were both listened to and information taken in and were able to, as an industry, BSA included, sort of influence kind of the direction of travel of that. I don't think that changes as they start to look at implementation. I think actually it gets even more important because they are, I think, turning to industry and stakeholders and saying, okay, now we've got this law. Like, there is a tremendous amount of work to continue on implementing in secondary acts. Workday will be rolling our sleeves up, just as I'm sure BSA will be, to play a constructive role to make sure that the regulatory regime that has been laid out can be successful.
Yeah, you hit 2 points there that I want to pick up on, because I feel like a lot of what we do is to try to just talk to policymakers about the way the industry works. And I think we found early on that the initial assumption from a lot of people was there's one company that develops and deploys and does everything with the AI. They do it all in-house and they put it out to consumers. And I think there's some social media companies that probably do operate that way, but for the most part, especially in the enterprise sector, you've got a company developing, you've got a company training, you've got a company fine-tuning, you've got a company it's a platform in order to get to the customer. There are a lot of different roles, and the responsibilities just have to fit those roles. And so when the EU, at least as we've seen in a lot of US legislation as well, has a developer category and a deployer category, different terminology, but that concept was really important, and something that I think just all Workday, all the enterprise software companies talking to policymakers about the way they develop and deploy AI was super important. And the other is on high risk uses. You're describing how, of course, some forms of HR operations are going to be, or use cases are going to be high risk, and others are not. And I think early on in the EU, they had just categories of health. Yep. And of course, the chest X-ray, that's really important. You want to make sure the AI is as fine-tuned as possible. And in others, my database management tool within a hospital doesn't have the same risk profile. So I think both of those are really important. Let me ask you one other question, if you don't mind. When you were on the Hill, you worked on a variety of different issues. And when you left the Hill, you ended up in the tech sector and at Workday in particular. What is it about the enterprise software industry and Workday in particular that drew you there?
I have to. I didn't know the words for values-based employment. I'll be honest. I didn't know what I was looking for. I stumbled into, and I've told him this story. And so I stumbled into, I worked for a member of Congress who I had frankly never heard of before I did the interview. And I stumbled in thinking I would be there for a couple of years and leave. And 13 and a half years later, I left. And it turns out, I stayed there for 13 and a half years because I like to sleep really well at night. I like to do things that I think are important, and I like to do them in a way that reflects well on the office and the member. And when my boss announced his retirement, I knew I wanted to go into the tech sector. I had done some work on tech issues, and I knew that they were just interesting to me. They weren't going anywhere. They were going to continue to be a larger and larger piece of the U.S. economy and the global economy. And so I thought they were interesting, and I thought that I could sleep well at night. And the opening came. Workday was looking to establish an office in Washington, D.C. And I had a number of people around me who were looking for roles and thinking about what, helping me figure out. And everyone said the same thing. They said, that's a really good fit for you. You'll be really happy there. And what they were saying, what I have come to find out, what they were saying is that place is as values driven as your last boss was. And so I joined Workday 6.5 years ago. I now have had the opportunity I manage all of our government affairs, both US and global and sustainable. It's frankly been amazing. I worked for a member of Congress who wanted to move policy, who wanted to engage, who thought that the reason he was in Congress was to influence outcomes that could affect people's lives. And I work for a company that feels the exact same way. There's tremendous support at Workday to get this AI governance approach right, so that people can have access to tools that can open up opportunities, increase their reskills, figure out where their next job might be, grow their income, like all of the benefits that we see about AI. And it's not lip service. We put in place a responsible AI program years ago, and we did it because that's the way our values drove us. And when we look at how we advance public policy, and we've had a chance to work together, our logo's on everything. We're through the front door. We're rolling up our sleeves. We show up to play a constructive role. It's the same way we show up for our customers. It's the same way we show up in our advocacy efforts. And I couldn't be happier.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, Chandler, thank you so much for talking with me, for talking about AI. I get the opportunity to do this with you from time to time, but not always on camera. So I appreciate that you are as candid on camera as you are off camera. And I always learn a lot, and it's really helpful, both about why it's important to Workday and about just the overall dynamics of the AI policy environment around the world, because this is really just an increasingly important issue for government, as well as for how we create jobs and make sure that everybody is lifted up. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Aaron.